Do you know what warm death is? It is when the brain of a freezing person goes insane and sends a signal that they are hot, unbearably hot. In December of 1941, just 30 kilometers from the Kremlin, German soldiers found their comrades in snowdrifts, completely naked, with smiles of bliss on their blue faces. How did the world's finest army, which had conquered Europe, turn into a mob of vagrants ready to kill for a pair of felt boots? Why did the steel of German tanks shatter like cheap glass, and the lubricant in rifles turn into glue? In this video, we will show what actually stopped the Wehrmacht. It was not just the frost. It was a hell where amputations were performed with a carpenter's saw without anesthesia, and the dead became part of the fortifications. Watch until the end. The truth about the price paid for these 30 kilometers makes the blood run cold. November 30th, 1941. The air is not clear. It rings.
It is not a sound. It is the physical pressure of absolute silence in which the world has frozen. Lance Corporal Otto Gross presses his binoculars to his eye sockets. The 6-power magnification of the Zeiss lenses picks gold needles out of the gray murk. The domes, the Kremlin. They are 30 kilometers away. One lunge for a mechanized division. 2 hours down the highway under normal conditions. But there are no conditions. There are no norms. There is only a white void devouring heat, will, and iron. The lenses fog up instantly. The steam from his breath does not dissolve, but settles as icy grit on the glass, on his collar, on his eyelashes. Gross does not blink. If he blinks, his eyelids might stick together. The fluid washing the eyeball thickens, turning vision into a painful process. He sees the objective. It is here, right in front of him. The illusion of accessibility drives men mad more effectively than hunger. 30 kilometers is an abyss. It is a distance that cannot be bridged because space has changed its properties. The thermometer on the armor has dropped past -42 degrees Celsius. This is no longer weather. It is an aggressive chemical environment. At this temperature, the familiar laws of mechanics cease to work. Steel becomes brittle as cheap glass. Rubber crumbles from the blow of a boot. Grease in the mechanisms loses its fluidity. It no longer lubricates. It glues. Gross lowers the binoculars. The metal body of the device burns his fingers even through wool gloves. The skin on his cheekbones stiffens, losing sensitivity. This is the first stage. The organism begins to shut down the periphery, saving the core. Blood retreats deep inside, to the organs, leaving the limbs to die. But right now, the soldier is not worried about his own body. He is worried about the body of the machine. Beside him towers a tank. 25 tons of German engineering turned into an icy monument to ambition. The Panzer IV has stood motionless for 6 hours. The engine compartment is covered in a crust of frost resembling mold. Inside this steel coffin, a struggle is taking place that has nothing to do with military regulations. It is a struggle of thermodynamics against mechanics. The mechanic, Corporal Weber, looks like the ghost of a stoker. His face is black with soot and oil mixed with dirt. Under his eyes are white patches of frostbite, bordered by inflamed red skin. He strikes the drive sprocket with a crowbar, trying to knock off frozen clumps of soil mixed with snow. The sound of the impact is dull, cottony. The metal does not ring. It groans. "Turn it over," wheezes Gross. His voice cracks. His vocal cords are dried out by the frosty air. "It won't go!" Weber spits out the words along with a cloud of steam. "The oil is like tar. The starter won't catch. The battery is dead. The electrolyte density dropped.
It's a lump of lead, not a battery.
They open the hatch of the engine compartment. No warmth comes from within. It smells of dead iron and gasoline that has lost the ability to evaporate. The fuel in the tanks is as cold as liquid nitrogen. To ignite in the cylinders, it needs a spark, but the electrical system is paralyzed. The spark plugs are flooded. The oil in the Maybach engine crankcase has turned into an asphalt mass. It has plastered the crankshaft and locked the pistons. An internal combustion engine requires heat to produce motion, but it cannot produce heat without motion. A vicious circle. A logistical dead end. "We need to heat it!" Weber throws the useless wrench onto the armor. The wrench slides off and vanishes into a snowdrift. "With a blowtorch, under the crankcase." "You'll burn the wiring." Gross looks at the mechanic's hands. The fingers are hooked. They do not uncurl fully.
The phalanges have taken the shape of the handles they have been gripping for the last 24 hours.
"Either I burn it or we die here," the mechanic snaps. "Without the engine, we are canned meat. The Russians won't even shoot. They'll just walk past and wait until morning. By morning, we'll be solid." Weber crawls under the belly of the tank. There, in the narrow space between the frozen earth and the steel underbelly, he tries to light the blowtorch. The gasoline in the torch nozzle is also frozen. It does not spray, but flows in a trickle. The corporal flicks his lighter. The flame is weak, trembling. It seems like a mockery of the surrounding icy desert. Finally, a flash. A blue flame roars out, licking the black metal of the crankcase. The smell of burning mixes with the smell of ozone. Gross stands above, watching the horizon. Where the Russian positions should be, it is empty. No smoke, no movement. Only the white noise of the snowy plain.
The enemy here is not people.
The enemy is entropy. Nature strives for absolute zero, for rest, for the cessation of all movement. The Wehrmacht army, built on speed, on tempo, on blitzkrieg, has collided with a force that denies speed as a physical phenomenon. Gross raises his binoculars again. His hands are trembling. It is not fear. It is the coarse shivering of hypothermia, hypothermic tremor. Muscles contract on their own, trying to generate at least a little heat. It is a reflex the soldier cannot control. He tries to focus on the distant domes. The gold on the horizon now seems not a target, but a hallucination, a mirage in an icy desert. "Come on!" Weber yells from underneath. "Try the crank!" Gross grabs the starting handle. The iron bites through the cold mitten, digging into his palm. He inserts the crooked starter into the socket. He needs to turn the shaft manually to break the oil film, to give the pistons even a chance to move.
He leans in with all his weight. His boots slide on the icy armor. The soles, hobnailed with steel, do not grip. The tank does not budge. The handle stands dead still, as if welded to the hull. He growls, straining his back. Vertebrae crack. His vision darkens from the exertion. It feels like vessels will burst or the metal will snap. "More!" Weber's voice is full of despair. Gross takes a breath. The icy air burns his lungs like acid. He yanks the handle toward himself. Not a millimeter. The shaft is glued solid to the cylinder block by congealed oil. The machinery is dead. A high-tech killing machine has turned into a pile of useless scrap worth 100,000 Reichsmarks. Here, at the 30th kilometer from Moscow, Germany's engineering genius has lost to the physics of phase transitions in water and hydrocarbons. Otto lets go of the handle. He breathes heavily, leaning against the cold turret.
The sweat that broke out under his uniform from the exertion cools instantly, turning into an icy shell on his body. His underwear becomes a damp, cold compress, drawing the last calories from his organism. This is the beginning of the end. First, the machinery freezes. Then the will freezes. Then the heart stops. He looks at his hands. On the right glove, where it touched the oily metal, the fabric has darkened and hardened. He tries to make a fist. The fingers bend slowly, with a delay, as if someone else is controlling them through a complex system of cables. "Kill the torch," he says into the void. "It's useless." Silence returns. It covers them, dense and heavy. One can only hear the metal of the crankcase, heated by the spot of flame, cooling down. Tick, tick, tick. It is the sound of contraction, the sound of defeat. Gross looks at the road leading west, back to where they came from. The road shines like a mirror. It is not asphalt, it is ice, a solid skating rink stretching into infinity. A picture from 2 months ago floats up in his memory. Back then, this ice was something else. It was liquid. It was mud that squelched, sucked in boots and wheels, promising that it couldn't get any worse. They prayed for a freeze. They asked for solid ground. Their prayers were answered, and it became their curse. Memory rewinds the tape. October 1941. This sterile white shroud does not exist yet. There is only a black, squelching abyss. Russian autumn is not like European autumn. It is not a rainy season. It is a change in the aggregate state of the soil. The black earth, mixing with water, turns into a substance that violates all standards of trafficability laid down in Wehrmacht technical manuals. It is glue. A viscous, heavy mass that clogs treads, sticks to wheels, and blocks transmissions. The pace of the offensive, the pride of German strategy, falls catastrophically. If in summer tank wedges covered 50 kilometers a day, slicing through Soviet defenses like a knife through butter, now distance is measured in hundreds of meters. Logistics collapse. The 3-ton Opel Blitz truck, the workhorse of the army, burns a full tank of gas to cover 10 kilometers. Engines roar at maximum RPMs, overheat, oil boils, but the wheels only polish the liquid mud, burying the vehicle up to the axles. Soldiers push the equipment with their shoulders. Greatcoats soaked in water and clay weigh 3 times the norm. Mud is everywhere. In food, in rifles, in ears. It sucks out strength faster than a forced march. Columns stretch for miles. Supply is interrupted. Artillery lags behind tanks. Infantry lags behind artillery. The army turns into a giant snake with a broken spine, writhing in the mud, trying to crawl east. Every evening in officers' tents, under the drumming of rain on canvas, the same phrase sounds. When will it freeze? Frost seems like salvation. Solid ground is a dream. It means the return of maneuver, speed, victory. Generals look at barometers like icons, and nature, as if mocking them, gives them what they ask for. On the night of November 4th, the temperature drops sharply. The mercury column falls below zero. The mud that has tormented hundreds of thousands of people begins to harden. First a crust appears, then it turns into a monolith. Roads become hard as concrete. Euphoria reigns in the headquarters. It seems the trap of the slush has opened. Order. Resume the offensive at full speed. But the joy lasts exactly until the first sharp turn. The German war machine falls into a new trap, even more terrible than the mud. The black earth, packed down by millions of wheels and tracks, did not turn into asphalt upon freezing. It turned into an ice rink. Polished, uneven, deadly slippery. A supply column of the 132nd Infantry Regiment moves in the night. Headlights are off, blackout discipline. Drivers navigate by the taillights of the vehicle ahead. Trucks move tightly, bumper to bumper. Speed, 20 kilometers per hour. It seems fast after the autumn crawling. Hans Müller, the driver of the lead truck, feels the steering wheel go numb. There is no feedback from the road. The wheels do not roll. They barely touch the surface, ready to lose traction at any moment. The rubber on German trucks is synthetic, hard. In the cold, it stiffens, turning into plastic. There are no studs. There are not enough tire chains for everyone. They have been waiting for them since September, but the trains with winter equipment are stuck somewhere near Warsaw. The road goes downhill, a slight grade that no one would notice in summer, but now it is a deadly attraction. Müller takes his foot off the gas pedal.
The vehicle should slow down on engine compression, but instead, the rear axle starts to skid. The heavy bed, loaded with crates of mines, lives by its own inertia. Physics is inexorable. The truck's vector of motion no longer coincides with the direction of the wheels. "Brake!" yells non-commissioned Officer Strauss, sitting next to him. "Can't brake!" Müller grips the steering wheel, trying to straighten the vehicle with short jerks. "It'll spin us!" He knows the theory. If you hit the brakes on ice, the wheels will lock, and the vehicle will become an unguided projectile weighing 4 tons. He tries to catch the road, but there is no road. There is only ice. The truck slowly, as if in slow motion, floats sideways toward the shoulder. The impact happens quietly and dully. The front wheel slides into the ditch. The vehicle lists. The center of gravity shifts. A second of balance, and the truck crashes onto its side with a roar. Crates of mines spill into the snow. The cabin glass shatters, showering the driver and officer with icy crumbs. The column stops. Rear vehicles try to brake. Screeching, grinding metal, dull thuds are heard. One truck slams into the rear of another. A radiator is punctured. Boiling antifreeze pours onto the ice, instantly freezing into yellowish foam. Strauss climbs out of the smashed cabin. His face is cut by a shard. The blood looks almost black in the frost. He slips on the ice, falls to his knees, tries to get up, falls again. Boots hobnailed with metal studs, Wehrmacht standard, grip grass and earth perfectly, but on ice, they turn a soldier into a cow on a hardwood floor. He cannot take a step without risking a fall. "Idiots!" he screams into the darkness, addressing not the soldiers, but the situation itself. "Who came up with the idea to fight on skates?" Drivers jump out of vehicles, panic, but not from the enemy, but from the loss of control. Men crawl toward the overturned truck. It is impossible to lift it. There is no crane. The tractor itself slides, unable to grip the surface to create traction. The road is blocked. A logistical artery has been severed by a single accident. The tanks coming behind are also trapped. The narrow tracks of German machines, designed for European highways, lack developed grousers for ice. On inclines and declines, 30-ton machines helplessly spin their tracks, sliding backward or slipping into ditches. For a tank to climb an icy hill, the crew has to place logs, greatcoats, branches under the tracks. Every 10 meters of ascent is an hour of hard labor in the piercing wind. Müller stands by the wrecked machine, rubbing his bruised shoulder. He looks at the endless ribbon of ice stretching into the dark. The mirage of salvation has dissipated. Solid ground turned out to be an enemy more terrible than liquid mud. The mud simply held them in place. The ice kills them in motion. Technical superiority, precision mechanics, calculated tactics, all of it shatters against a simple physical reality.
The coefficient of sliding friction approaches zero. War has ceased to be an art of maneuver. It has become a struggle for the right to simply stand on one's feet. The frost strikes more accurately than any artillery. A shell has a blast radius. Cold does not. It penetrates everywhere there is a gap, everywhere there is liquid, everywhere metal touches metal. By the beginning of December 1941, the Wehrmacht faces an opponent they were not taught to defeat in military academies: the phase transition of matter. The war of mechanisms ends. The technical collapse begins. In the trenches near Klin, infantrymen learn a terrible truth: their weapons no longer fire. Standard gun oil, designed for a temperate European climate, changes its properties at -35 degrees. It thickens. It turns into a viscous substance resembling wood glue or hardened resin. A regular infantryman pulls the trigger of his Mauser 98K carbine. The striker spring releases, but the firing pin does not strike the primer of the cartridge. It gets stuck in the thick lubricant, slows down, and only faintly scratches the brass. There is no shot. There is only a dull, useless click. The soldier racks the bolt. He strikes the handle with his palm, trying to force through the resistance of the congealed oil. It is useless. In his hands, he no longer holds a precision weapon of retribution, but a 5-kilogram club made of wood and steel. The MG-34 machine guns are silent. Their automation, built on perfect fitting of parts and tight tolerances, cannot withstand the frost. The belt does not feed. The bolt does not close fully. The German soldier on the front line finds himself virtually unarmed.
To take a shot, one must dismantle the bolt and clean out the lubricant completely, leaving the metal dry. But dry metal freezes to itself instantly in the cold. Artillery dies louder. The hydraulics of recoil systems are a complex system of pistons and fluids damping the monstrous energy of a shot. The fluid in the cylinders clouds and loses fluidity. It becomes solid. When a 105mm howitzer fires, the barrel does not recoil smoothly. It strikes the carriage like a sledgehammer on an anvil. Steel, made brittle by the cold, cannot withstand the shock load. Carriages crack. Trails snap. Expensive, complex guns are disabled after the very first volley, turning into scrap metal. Crews stand around the cannons, afraid to touch the breech with a bare hand. Skin instantly bonds to the icy steel. An attempt to pull the hand away ends with strips of living flesh remaining on the metal. In the rear, where the tank divisions are stationed, a continuous straining howl is heard. It is not an attack. It is the agony of engines. An order has come: never shut off the engines. Never. If a tank or truck engine cools down, starting it again at -40 will be impossible without hours of heating with open fire. So engines run 24 hours a day. Fuel, the precious gasoline delivered with such difficulty across snowy Poland and Belarus, burns in vain. Tanks stand still, but their tanks empty. Engine life is consumed at a catastrophic rate. At idle, in the frost, oil pumps poorly through the system. Oil starvation occurs. Parts rub almost dry. In one night of idling, an engine wears out as if the tank had marched 200 kilometers. But even a running engine guarantees no life. At night, when the temperature falls to extreme values, sharp, cracking sounds resembling pistol shots are heard in the camps. Sentries flinch, raising their weapons. But there is no enemy. It is the sound of cylinder blocks cracking. Water in the cooling system, if they failed to drain it or dilute it with scarce antifreeze, freezes. Ice expands, and the cast-iron engine block bursts from the inside. A crack crawls along the metal, releasing steam and oil.
the machine dies instantly and forever. Repair companies turn into circles of hell. The working conditions for mechanics violate all conceivable limits of human endurance. There are no hangars, no garages. Repairs are done under the open sky, in wind that cuts through greatcoats. Mechanic Gunther Krause tries to unscrew a nut on the road wheel of a half-track tractor. The wrench slips. Gunther slams his knuckles against the armor. He does not feel the pain immediately. His hands are too frozen. He only sees the skin, blackened by oil, split open and thick, dark blood well up. It freezes into a brown crust before it has time to drip onto the snow. Tools break. The high-carbon steel of German wrenches becomes brittle as porcelain in the frost. With a strong jerk, the wrench simply shatters into pieces. Shards of metal slash the face. Gunther curses, but his lips barely move. The only source of life, and simultaneously deadly danger, is the blowtorch. The blue flame hums, heating the oil pan of a truck. Around them are gasoline fumes, oily rags, dry grass under the snow. One awkward movement, one spark, and the vehicle flares up like a torch. But there is no other way. Either the risk of burning or death from cold. The mechanics' faces are black with soot. They look like miners risen from the pit, only instead of coal dust, they are covered in carbon from exhaust and burnt oil. There are no spare parts. Supply is cut off. Technical cannibalism becomes the norm. From one broken machine, they take the generator. From another, the starter. From a third, the carburetor, to assemble one Frankenstein capable of moving. The fields of the Moscow region turn into graveyards of equipment. Hundreds of trucks, armored personnel carriers, motorcycles stand abandoned along the roads. They are not hit. There are no marks of shell impacts on them. They are whole, but dead. Frozen electrolyte, burst radiators, jammed gearboxes. This is a defeat not of tactics, but of engineering. The German design school created masterpieces of precision mechanics, ideal machines for ideal conditions. Complex, temperamental, requiring quality maintenance. Here, in the icy desert, the winner is the one whose design is simpler, the one with larger tolerances, the one whose equipment is cruder. The elegant clockwork mechanisms of the Wehrmacht stop, clogged with ice. The brute force of nature breaks the delicate gears of civilization. Gunther throws the broken wrench into the snow. He wipes his hands with a rag that stands stiff as a board. Next to him, a mechanic tries to hammer a pin into a track with a sledgehammer. The sound of metal on metal is ringing, glassy, unpleasant. It carries for kilometers in the frosty air. It is a requiem. The sound of an army that conquered Europe, turning into pedestrians lost in endless snows. They do not yet know that soon they will have to abandon these dead machines to save their own freezing bodies. The machinery gave up first. Now it is the turn of the people. The technology is dead. Now biology is dying. If one looks at an infantry company marching along the Volokolamsk highway, the eye refuses to recognize in these people the elite of the German nation. These are not soldiers of the victorious Wehrmacht. This is a procession of ghosts, a carnival of ragamuffins, an army of vagrants wandering into an icy nowhere. The standard uniform, designed in the warm offices of Berlin, turns into an instrument of torture at -35 degrees. Summer tunics made of blended fabric, nicknamed cellulose armor, do not warm. They chill in the frost, drawing heat from the body like a vacuum. The steel helmet is an icy dome that freezes the brain and causes unbearable headaches. Soldiers take off their helmets and put on whatever they can find. Heads are wrapped in women's shawls, wool scarves, scraps of blankets. On their feet, instead of boots, are monstrous constructions of straw, rags, and rope. To survive, the soldier turns into a looter. This is not robbery for profit. It is robbery for thermoregulation. In captured villages, the hunt is not for gold or food, but for wool. Lance Corporal Gross sees his platoon insulating themselves. A young machine gunner has pulled a quilted peasant jacket taken from a dead Russian over his greatcoat. Around his neck is a downy women's shawl, coarse knit, goat down. This shawl looks grotesque combined with ammo belts and a grenade at his belt, but it saves him from the wind that cuts skin like a razor. They stuff newspapers under their tunics.
Newsprint creates an air layer. The Völkischer Beobachter, with Goebbels' speeches about imminent victory, now serves as insulation for the rotting lungs of the rank and file. The army loses its human appearance. Razors are frozen, there is no soap. Faces are covered in a crust of dirt and thick stubble on which icicles from breath freeze. Lice become a scourge of biblical proportions. They live in the seams of dirty underwear that hasn't been changed for months. In the warmth of dugouts, the parasites become active, driving men mad with itching. In the frost, they freeze, but as soon as the body warms up slightly in motion, the torture resumes. Typhus follows on the heels of the cold, but the main epidemic is frostbite. It mows down the ranks more effectively than machine guns. Every morning, company medics cross dozens of names off the personnel lists. Men do not die from bullets. They simply fall apart. Field Hospital of the 268th Infantry Division. It is a large village log cabin where the glass is knocked out and the windows are covered with blankets. Inside, there is a heavy, thick smell. It is the smell of sweet rot, carbolic acid, unwashed bodies, and fear. A conveyor belt works here. The surgeon, Major of Medical Service Kramer, has not slept for 3 days. His gown, once white, now resembles a butcher's apron. It is stiff with dried blood. In the operating room, on a simple wooden table, lies a soldier. He is 20 years old. The soles of his feet are black. This is not a metaphor. The tissue is dead. The boundary between living pink skin and dead black flesh runs along the ankle. Gangrene, 4th degree. Tissue necrosis is irreversible. There are no instruments. Thin surgical saws have dulled or broken. Kramer uses an ordinary carpenter's saw boiled in a cauldron. There is no anesthesia. Supplies of chloroform ran out a week ago. Morphine is only for officers and severe abdominal wounds. For the frostbitten, there is only schnapps, if lucky, or a piece of wood in the teeth so they don't bite their tongue off from pain. "Hold him," croaks Kramer. His voice is dull, devoid of emotion. 2 orderlies lean on the boy's shoulders. The soldier stares at the ceiling with eyes dilated in terror. He does not feel his feet. The nerve endings died along with the skin. The pain will come later, when the saw reaches live bone. The doctor begins to saw. The sound is hideous, crunching, the scraping of teeth against bone. A foot falls into a basin standing on the floor. A dull thud. Thump. In the basin lies a pile of toes, feet, hands. It is a dump of human spare parts, biomass rejected by the cold. Hauptmann Strasser appears in the doorway. He is holding his hand. The hand is wrapped in a dirty rag. "Doctor," says the officer. His teeth are chattering, beating a tattoo. "My boy's fingers are turning white. We need ointment. Fat." "Anything." Kramer does not look up from the stump. He forms a flap of skin to close the bone cut. The needles bend against the hardened flesh. "There is no ointment, the surgeon replies without turning his head. There is no fat. I only have a saw. Bring those whose parts have turned black. Tell the rest to rub with snow. You can't use snow, Strasser yells. The skin peels off from snow. Then let them urinate on their hands. Kramer throws a bloody needle holder into a tray of cloudy alcohol. Urine is warm. It is the only medicine we have left in abundance. Next! The orderlies carry away the stump of a human being who 5 minutes ago was an infantryman. The next one is placed on the table. This one has frostbite on his face. His nose and ears are hard as stone. When tapped with forceps, they make a wooden sound. They will simply have to be broken off. Outside, at the entrance to the infirmary, a mountain of boots grows. The boots are not empty. Inside many of them, fragments of feet remain. It is impossible to remove shoes from frostbitten feet. The legs swell, turning into shapeless logs. The footwear is cut off. Leather, rubber, and dead flesh become a single whole. The German soldier, conqueror of Paris and Warsaw, now dreams not of the Iron Cross. He dreams of felt boots. Russian valenki made of felted wool become the most coveted trophy. People kill for a pair of valenki. They are taken from prisoners, from the killed, from still warm corpses. But there are few valenki, and there is a lot of frost. In the evenings in the dugouts, soldiers engage in a strange, primal activity. They try to make fire and preserve crumbs of heat. Officers turn a blind eye to uniform violations. Discipline melts. If a soldier has wrapped himself in a curtain stolen from Tchaikovsky's estate in Klin, and it allows him to hold a rifle, let him wear the curtain. The aesthetics of the Third Reich died here in the snowdrifts. Only zoology remains. The human body is a furnace. It needs fuel, but field kitchens have fallen behind. The bread that is brought has to be chopped with an axe. It is frozen through. Cans have bulged. Soldiers gnaw on icy bread, breaking their teeth. There isn't enough energy even to heat the organism, let alone for war. Caloric deficit combined with hypothermia causes apathy. The will is paralyzed. A man sits in a snowdrift to rest for a minute. He feels warm. He thinks he is at home, by the fireplace. This is warm death, an insidious trap of a freezing brain. If he isn't kicked, isn't forced to get up, in an hour he will be a hard object of the landscape. Glassy eyes staring into the gray sky, and a smile of bliss on a blue face. The humanitarian catastrophe has become a fact. Army Group Center is no longer attacking. It is trying not to vanish as a physical quantity. The greatness of Germany dissolves in the smell of rotting flesh and chloride of lime. And above all this is the indifferent, white, endless snow that covers both the living and the dead with one shroud. Death in war has its hierarchy. There is instant death, from a sniper's bullet, shutting off the light before the sound of the shot reaches the ears. There is dirty death, from shrapnel in the gut, mixed with screams and guts. But here, in the frozen fields near Narofominsk, a different kind of demise reigns. Quiet death. Death the deceiver. It comes not in the guise of a bony old woman with a scythe, but in the form of soft, cozy warmth that the body lacks so much. Private Hermann Schmidt of the infantry regiment sits at the bottom of a foxhole. He is 19 years old. According to the roster, he should be guarding the sector of fire at the edge of the forest, but he is not looking at the forest. He is looking inside himself. His body, exhausted by weeks of malnutrition and cold, has lost the main battle, the battle for thermoregulation.
All night he shivered. A violent, uncontrollable trembling shook his whole body. Muscles contracted with the frequency of a machine gun bolt, burning remaining glucose to generate even a calorie of heat. His teeth chattered so hard it seemed the enamel was about to crack. It was the agony of life, the last line of defense of physiology. But by 3 a.m, the trembling stopped. Schmidt thinks he feels better. In reality, it is a signal of the end. Glycogen stores in the liver are depleted. Core body temperature has dropped below 35 degrees. The hypothalamus, the body's chief dispatcher, shuts down the periphery. Vessels are spasmed so tight that blood flow in the limbs has stopped. Toes and fingers are already dead, but Herman does not feel it. Nerve endings are blocked by the cold. He feels calm. The fear that kept him tense for the last months, fear of Russian tanks, of the sergeant, of death, disappears. Indifference sets in. Apathy. This is the brain, deprived of a flow of warm, oxygenated blood, beginning to sink into a twilight state. At 4 a.m, the stage of warm delirium begins. This is a known phenomenon of freezing, a cruel joke of physiology. The thermoregulation center goes crazy. Instead of the signal cold, it starts sending a false signal hot. Schmidt thinks he is sitting not in an icy pit, but by a huge tiled stove in his aunt's house in Bavaria. Fire roars behind the cast iron door. Heat rolls over him in waves, enveloping him, penetrating under the dirty greatcoat. Hot, he whispers. His lips barely move. They are blue as plums. Too hot. He does what burial teams find later in all winter wars. He starts to undress. With stiff fingers, breaking his nails, he unbuttons his greatcoat. He tears at the collar of his tunic. He needs to throw off this weight, let in the coolness. He rips the wool scarf from his neck, the very one sent to him with the last mail. The scarf falls into the snow, looking like a gray snake. Herman unbuttons the top buttons of his undershirt. His chest, white, with ribs showing, is exposed to the blow of frost at -30. For the organism, it is instant shock. The heart, already working erratically, skips a beat, then a second. The rhythm slows. 50 beats per minute. 40. 30. He reaches into his tunic pocket. There, in a pigskin wallet, is a photograph. Mother. She stands on the porch of their house, squinting in the summer sun. Schmidt takes out the snapshot. It seems to him that light is coming from the card. He brings it to his eyes. His pupils are dilated. They no longer react to the light of flares rising over the horizon. "I'm home, Mutti," he exhales. Along with this exhalation, the last cloud of steam leaves his lungs. No inhalation follows. The heart gives a last, weak push and stops. Blood, having become thick as syrup, stands still in the veins. Water in the cells begins to crystallize. Sharp edges of ice crystals tear cell membranes from the inside. The body, a second ago a biological object, becomes a geological one. It hardens. It turns into stone. The eyes remain open, looking through the photograph, through the parapet of the trench, through the night, into the white nowhere. Morning of December 5th. The dawn is gray, murky, sunless. Lance Corporal Zimmer walks along the trench, kicking the sleepers with his boots. "Up! Post check! Get up, swine, unless you want to freeze!" Soldiers stir under piles of rags, groan, cough. The sound of coughing is dry, barking. Everyone's lungs are chilled. Zimmer reaches Schmidt's foxhole. "Hey, kid!" he yells. "It's your turn to go for the mess tins. Get up!" Schmidt does not move. He sits, leaning back against the frozen earth, semi-reclining, with his collar unbuttoned. In his hands is the white rectangle of the photograph.
On his face is a strange expression of calm, almost a smile. Hoarfrost has thickly covered his eyelashes and eyebrows, turning his face into a mask. Zimmer leans over and shakes him by the shoulder. The lance corporal's hand encounters not the soft pliability of a body, but the hardness of granite. The shoulder does not move. The uniform, soaked in sweat and moisture, has frozen into a crust, becoming an exoskeleton. The body itself, inside this form, is a solid, icy monolith. Zimmer jerks his hand back as if burned. "Verdammt," he exhales. "Gone." Soldiers who walked up look into the pit. No one crosses themselves. No one takes off their hat. There is no grief in their eyes, only dull animal fear. And envy. He has already suffered his share. He is no longer cold. "We need to take his papers," someone says from behind in a hoarse voice. "And his dog tag." "Take them yourself," Zimmer snaps. He takes a step back. "I'm not touching him. He rings if you knock." They stand around the dead man. Schmidt sits like a monument to himself. The photograph of his mother has frozen to his fingers fast. To take it, one would have to break the phalanges. No one wants to do that. There is a superstition born in these snows. Do not touch the frozen, or the cold will pass to you. Death here is contagious. It is not mysticism, it is instinct. Touching absolute death, a body whose temperature equals the ambient temperature, causes physiological rejection. "Leave him," commands Zimmer. "The burial team will take him, if they make it, if they don't croak themselves." He turns away and walks further along the trench, hiding his hands in his pockets. "Cover him with a shelter half," he throws over his shoulder. He's watching, looking right into the soul. One of the soldiers, an old corporal, throws a tarp over the sitting figure. The fabric lies in stiff folds, hiding the statue. Schmidt remains at his post. Now he is part of the fortification, a bag of frozen water and calcium reinforcing the trench wall. He did not desert. He simply moved to a different aggregate state. The wind picks up, tearing drifting snow from the parapet. Snow begins to fill the pit, sweeping away tracks, leveling the trench with the field. Nature takes back its own. For it, there is no difference between a stone, a tank, and a human. Everything that loses heat becomes part of the landscape. The cold is indifferent, and that is its most terrible weapon. Not hatred, but absolute cosmic indifference to protein-based life. December 5th and 6th, 1941. The horizon ceases to be static. It explodes. In the frosty air, where sound travels faster and sharper, the cannonade sounds not like thunder, but like the crack of the fabric of the universe tearing. German sentries, turned into ice statues at their posts, are the first to see the flashes. It is not dawn. It is the beginning of the end of Operation Typhoon. From the white gloom, from the snow vortex that seemed lifeless, a new force materializes. These are fresh Siberian divisions. They are not exhausted by months of retreat. They are not broken by defeats. But their main weapon at this second is not Mosin rifles, but equipment. The Soviet command throws into battle men whose thermoregulation is protected by centuries of experience surviving in a subarctic climate. Instead of thin European greatcoats, sheepskin coats. Thick fur creates an air cushion, preserving body heat even in the wind. Instead of boots hobnailed with nails that suck life out of the feet, valenki, felted wool. In them, the foot breathes but does not freeze.
This is primitive but brilliant technology. Valenki do not slide on ice. They allow the fighter to move silently and quickly, where a German infantryman falls and breaks bones. Ski battalions appear on the flanks. This is the mobile infantry of winter. They move at a speed of 30 kilometers per hour, flowing around German strongpoints, cutting communications. For a frozen German who can barely turn his head in his cocoon of rags, these white figures flying across the snow are ghosts. It is impossible to hit them with aimed fire. It is impossible to track them. But the most terrible sound for the ears of Wehrmacht soldiers is the low, rumbling bass of diesel engines. T-34s enter the battlefield. The T-34 tank. At this moment, it is not just a combat vehicle. It is a triumph of engineering created for extreme conditions. German panzers run on gasoline. Gasoline is volatile, flammable, temperamental. The Soviet V2 is a diesel. It is cruder. It is simpler. It starts in the frost with compressed air, sneezing black smoke. But it works. Diesel fuel does not flare up from the slightest spark. However, the main advantage of the T-34 right now is not the gun or the armor, but the chassis. Wide tracks. Engineers at the Kharkov plant designed the ground pressure to be comparable to the pressure of a human foot. The tank does not cut the snow. It moves on top of it. It floats over snowdrifts in which German 3s and 4s sit on their bellies. The narrow tracks of German machines, designed for the hard roads of Europe, become anchors here. The T-34 possesses the tactical mobility of an all-terrain vehicle. The attack begins suddenly. There are no long firefights. There is a mass strike. White silhouettes of tanks blending with the snow rise before the German trenches. Infantry riding on armor, men in white camouflage suits. Only black slits for eyes and the blued barrels of PPSH submachine guns are visible. The Germans try to react. Officers yell commands, trying to rouse men from their stupor. Machine gunner Hans falls to his MG-34. He sees running figures. He presses the trigger. Click. The weapon is silent. The bolt is frozen. The lubricant, turned into glue, holds the firing pin. Hans yanks the charging handle, tearing skin from his palms. Useless. The mechanism is dead. He looks at approaching death unarmed, clutching 5 kilograms of useless, high-tech iron in his hands. From a neighboring position, a PaK-38 anti-tank gun tries to fire. The gunner turns the hand wheel, but it turns stiffly, in jerks. The grease in the traverse mechanism has thickened. The barrel moves too slowly, failing to keep up with the Russian tank. The shot rings out, but the shell goes wide, exploding the snow 10 meters behind the machine. There will be no second chance. The tank turns its turret. 76 millimeters of steel and explosives put a period at the end of the duel. The Russian "Yura" is not like a movie battle cry. In the frosty air, reflecting multiple times off the forest, it sounds like a continuous, vibrating howl. It is a psychological attack. The sound wave rolls ahead of the infantry, frozen, apathetic Germans whose will to resist has been eroded by weeks of cold, fall into panic. This is not a battle of equals. It is a beating. Soviet soldiers are heated by running. Their blood boils with adrenaline. They sweat in their sheepskin coats. The Germans are fettered by cold. Their movements are slowed, like fish in a freezing pond. To lift a rifle, a German needs to overcome the resistance of his own stiffened clothes and muscles. Reaction lags by seconds. In close combat, a second is an eternity. The T-34 tank bursts onto the positions. It does not shoot. It crushes. Tracks grind the parapet, machine gun nests, dugouts. The crunch of breaking logs mixes with the crunch of bones.
The multi-ton machine irons out the trenches, turning the defense into a mess of snow, earth, and bodies. Those who tried to hide in shelters find themselves buried alive. A German corporal, throwing aside his jammed submachine gun, tries to run, but the deep snow is a trap. He takes a step and sinks to his waist. The Valenki of the Soviet infantrymen running behind keep him easily on the surface of the crust. A rifle butt to the back knocks the German face down into the snowdrift. A cold bayonet enters the body easily, without resistance. The counterattack of Soviet troops near Moscow is a triumph of kinetic energy over statics. The Germans hoped to winter over by digging into the ground. The Russians did not give them that chance. They forced them to move. And movement for an exhausted, freezing organism without warm clothes means rapid death. Driven out of warm burrows, deprived of shelter, Wehrmacht soldiers find themselves one-on-one with the wind and an enraged enemy. The balance of power collapsed in a few hours. The army that considered itself the hunter instantly turned into the prey. The front is not retreating. The front is disintegrating. By the middle of December 1941, the concept of a defense line ceases to exist as the geometry of war. It turns into a chaotic cluster of points where individual units still try to shoot, and huge voids through which, like water through a burst dam, panic pours. The General Staff in Berlin sends coded messages. The Führer's order is categorical: not a step back. Officers are ordered to shoot panic-mongers on the spot. Troops must stand to the death, clinging to every settlement, turning it into a fortress. But radio waves cannot stop the physics of the process. Army Group Center, having lost command, communication, and heat, is no longer a single organism. It crumbles into thousands of atoms, individual people whose consciousness is ruled by a single imperative: run west, to where it is warm, to where there is life. Retreat turns into uncontrolled flight. Roads leading to the rear are instantly clogged. These are not organized columns. These are clots in the circulatory system of war. Narrow tracks cleared of snow, along which supplies used to go to the front, are now packed with equipment going back. Trucks, armored personnel carriers, staff cars, wagons, everything is mixed into one giant, slowly crawling snake. Movement is intermittent. 10 meters forward, an hour of waiting. Engines run at idle, devouring remaining fuel. When the tank runs dry, the vehicle is not refueled. It is abandoned. The driver drains the water from the radiator, or doesn't, he no longer cares, takes a rifle, and climbs into the bed of the next truck. Abandoned equipment becomes a barricade. If an Opel Blitz stalls in the middle of the road, no one tries to fix it. They just push it into the ditch if they have the strength. If there is no strength, or the vehicle is too heavy, they drive around it over virgin snow. Those driving around get stuck themselves. The jam grows. The blockage stretches for tens of kilometers. The atmosphere on this road is saturated with concentrated animal terror. It is the fear of a hunted beast that feels the breath of hounds on its neck. From the east comes a rumble. It is Russian tanks. They are not moving on roads. They are moving across fields, cutting off escape routes. The realization that the pincers could close at any moment turns disciplined German soldiers into a mob. A major of the field police stands at a crossroads. He is trying to execute an order. He wears a long leather greatcoat with fur. He is fed. He is shaven. In his hand is a Walther pistol. He screams, trying to drown out the roar of engines and the howling of the wind. "Halt! Turn around! Take up defensive positions along the tree line! I order you!" He waves the pistol in front of the face of the driver of a half-track tractor. The driver, wrapped over his cap in a woman's scarf, looks at the major with empty, glassy eyes. He does not see the rank. He does not hear the order. He sees an obstacle. "Out of the way!" wheezes the driver. The major shoots into the air. The dry crack of the shot is drowned in the clatter. The crowd of infantrymen trudging along the shoulder does not even duck. They don't care. They have passed the point of no return for obedience. For them, this officer is not a representative of authority, but a hindrance to survival. Someone from the crowd simply shoves the major. The officer slips on the packed ice. He falls under the wheels of the tractor. The driver does not brake. He doesn't even look down. The track runs over the leather greatcoat with a clang. A short, wet crunch is heard, like a dry branch breaking. But the sound is deeper, heavier. Pelvic bones and the rib cage burst under the weight of 7 tons of iron. The tractor rolls over the obstacle and crawls on. The crowd closes up. No one stops. The major's body is pressed into the ice, becoming part of the road surface. The roads of death are strewn not only with equipment, they are strewn with ballast. Ballast means the wounded. Trucks are few. Space in them is worth its weight in gold. Those who can hold a weapon, or those who are stronger, pack into the truck beds. The seriously wounded, who were being transported to the rear, start getting unloaded. Ambulance buses get stuck in snowdrifts. Doctors and drivers, realizing the vehicle cannot be pulled out, leave on foot. Inside remain men with broken legs, with shot-through stomachs, with amputations. They scream, begging not to be left behind. But their screams are just noise. The healthy walk past. The instinct of self-preservation suppresses empathy. Nan becomes not a wolf per man, but a function of saving his own biomass. Within a few hours, the bus turns into a freezer. The screams subside. The wounded freeze right on the stretchers, in bandages soaked in congealed blood. They do not die from wounds. They die because the logistics system deemed them unprofitable cargo. The apogee of chaos arrives when Soviet tanks come out onto the tail of the column. T-34s appear from the snowy shroud like a punishing hammer. They do not waste shells. They just hit the gas. A crush begins. Trucks try to scatter, crash into each other, overturn. Men jump out of truck beds on the move, breaking legs. Tanks crash into the cluster of vehicles. Armor strikes the metal of the sides. The sound of metal grinding against metal is such that people's ears bleed. A tank runs over a Horch passenger car, turning it into a flat pancake in 2 seconds, along with the passengers. Tracks grind everything. The wood of the truck beds, the steel of frames, meat, the cloth of greatcoats. The road turns into a mess of mud, snow, debris, and human remains. This is not a battle. This is the work of a meat grinder. German soldiers run into the forest, dropping everything: packs, weapons, loot. The snow is waist deep. Running in such snow is impossible. A man takes 10 steps, gets exhausted, falls. His heart hammers in his throat, tearing apart his chest. His lungs burn with fire. Those who fell do not get up. Following them, others step on them. Panic shuts off reason. People clamber over the backs of fallen comrades, using them as a causeway so as not to fall into the snowdrift. Friendship, frontline brotherhood, all that was left back there in the warm October. Here, there is only the animal terror of being crushed or freezing. By evening, the road represents a graveyard of Wehrmacht ambitions. Kilometers of burnt, twisted iron. Black smoke drifts low over the ground, mixing with the fog. And silence. Only the crackling of burning tires and the moans of those the tracks didn't finish off, and the frost hasn't finished yet. But the frost will come.
At night, the temperature will drop to -38. It will mercifully finish off everyone left alive, turning the road of death into a frozen, monumental monument to catastrophe. The panic has ended. The eternal peace of ice has arrived. The catastrophe near Moscow is not an accident. It is the logical result of an equation in which one of the variables was false from the very beginning. If one dissects the body of Operation Typhoon like a pathologist dissects a corpse, the cause of death will turn out not to be the frost. The cause of death will be a systemic error: arrogance. The German General Staff planned the war as a sprint. The script was written for a summer campaign. In the logistics calculations, the column "winter" was missing. It was assumed that by the onset of cold weather, the Soviet Union would cease to exist as a state, and Wehrmacht soldiers would be warming themselves in Moscow apartments. It was a gambler's bet, where he bet everything on zero. But red came up. The foundation of the failure was laid not at the front, but in the rear, on the railroad tracks. The main artery of war, the railroad, was cut not by bombs, but by geometry. The width of the European gauge is 1,435 millimeters. The width of the Russian gauge is 1,524 millimeters. A difference of only 89 millimeters, less than the length of an index finger. But these millimeters stopped the most powerful army in the world. German trains loaded with winter uniforms, spare parts, fuel, and antifreeze reach Brest and stop. There is no way further. Russian locomotives were stolen or destroyed during the retreat. German locomotives cannot drive on wide rails. Thousands of kilometers of track need to be re-gauged. Thousands of tons of cargo need to be transloaded by hand from one car to another. Mountains of crates accumulate at transshipment points in Poland and Belarus. There, deep in the rear, lie millions of warm greatcoats, fur vests, felt boots. They exist. They are real. But they lie in warehouses in Warsaw and Minsk, while near Istra, soldiers wrap themselves in stolen curtains. Logistics are torn. Between the quartermaster with the clothing warehouse and the freezing rifleman in the trench lie hundreds of kilometers of snowy void that there is nothing to cross with. The second factor is friction. Clausewitz called it the fog of war, but here it is the physical resistance of the environment. The Russians retreated, but they fought for every kilometer. Every burned bridge, every ambush, every hopeless counterattack of encircled units near Vyazma or Bryansk. All this devoured the Germans' main resource: time. The Wehrmacht won battles but lost the calendar. The fierce resistance of the Red Army slowed the tempo of the offensive. Plan Barbarossa was stalling. If the Germans had reached Moscow in October, before the mud season and frosts, the outcome might have been different. But the Russians sold their lives at the exchange rate of one division for 1 day of delay. They paid a terrible price, but they bought time for General Frost. They dragged the enemy into winter, for which he was biologically and technically unprepared. Headquarters of Army Group Center. A warm hut requisitioned from a wealthy peasant. Maps hang on the walls, crisscrossed with red and blue arrows. But the maps lie. The blue arrows of German strikes run into a void. The quartermaster general stands by the table. His face is gray, bags under his eyes black from insomnia. Opposite him is the commander. The room is warm, but the officers are shivering. It is the chill of realization. "Where is the fuel?" The commander does not shout. He asks quietly, and the question is all the more terrifying. Guderian's tank group is stopped. The Fourth Army is stopped. We have enough fuel left for 30 kilometers of travel. "Trains are stuck in Smolensk," replies the quartermaster. He fidgets with a pencil, breaking the lead. Partisans blew up the bridge over the Berezina. Repairs will take a week. We don't have a week. The commander slams his fist on the map. We don't even have 24 hours. The Russians have broken through the front at Kalinin. I need to transfer reserves, but there is nothing to transport reserves on. Trucks without gas are just snowdrifts of iron. We are trying to deliver fuel by air, justifies the logistician. Junkers 52s, but the weather, blizzard.
Aviation isn't flying.
And the winter uniforms, interrupts the commander. You promised winter uniforms 2 weeks ago. My soldiers are fighting in summer cotton. I have 200 frostbite cases a day in my regiments. That's more than from enemy fire. The uniforms are in Minsk. We can't pull them through the jams. Roads are clogged. Priority is given to ammunition. The commander sinks onto a chair. The chair creaks pitifully. He looks at the map, which now seems to him a diagram of a giant trap. Beautiful arrows on paper have turned into real graveyards. Do you understand what we have done? He says, staring at a single point. We stretched communications until they snapped. We drove the army into a bottleneck. We strangled ourselves. Silence hangs in the room. Only the blizzard howling outside the window can be heard, burying supply routes, burying hope. It was the collapse of a strategy. The German machine, accustomed to working like a clock, collided with a reality where mechanisms do not work. They failed to account for the factor of space. Russia turned out to be too big to swallow in one bite. Supply lines stretched for thousands of kilometers, becoming thin and fragile. Partisans cut these lines in the rear, striking the most painful points, locomotives and trucks. Instead of a powerful fist striking the enemy's heart, splayed, frost-bitten fingers that could no longer make a fist found themselves near Moscow. The system malfunctioned. The German soldier dying in a snowdrift was killed not only by a Russian bayonet or frost. He was killed by a clerical error in Berlin, an underestimation of logistics, and the criminal arrogance of those who believed that the will of an entire people could be broken according to a railroad timetable. The trains didn't come. The schedule was disrupted. And for this delay, the Wehrmacht paid with blood. On December 9th, 1941, the myth of the Wehrmacht's invincibility ceases to be an axiom and turns into smoke. This smoke rises over thousands of carcasses of burnt tanks, obscuring the horizon from Klin to Tula. For the first time since the beginning of the Second World War, for the first time since the moment a German boot stepped across the border of Poland, the German war machine did not just stop. It rolled back. If one rises to a bird's-eye view over the snowy fields of the Moscow region, a picture resembling a planetary-scale landfill opens up to the gaze. This is a graveyard of ambitions. To the very horizon, as far as the eye can see, the white plain is disfigured by black and gray spots. This is abandoned equipment. Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks, Stug assault guns, Hanomag APCs, thousands of Opel, Mercedes, Busing NAG trucks. They stand in columns, stuck in snowdrifts, lie overturned in ditches, turn black at crossroads. This is not just a loss of iron. This is a loss of industrial potential that Germany will never be able to restore fully. Every tank represents thousands of man-hours of work by skilled workers of the Ruhr. Tons of alloy steel, complex optics, and precision mechanics. All this now belongs to the Russian winter. The Wehrmacht lost its main striking force near Moscow, the tank groups. The spine of the Panzerwaffe is cracked. Loss statistics cease to be a number and become a demographic catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands of killed, wounded, and missing in action appear in the reports. But the most terrible column in the medical service reports is frostbite victims. 133,000 men were taken out of action with the diagnosis thermal tissue damage in the first month of winter alone. These are entire armies turned into invalids without a single shot fired. Hospitals in the rear are overcrowded. In Warsaw, Minsk, Smolensk, limbs are amputated around the clock. Germany gets its sons back not as conquering heroes, but as cripples, without legs and arms, with faces disfigured by black spots of necrosis. This is a blow to the nation's morale that cannot be hidden by propaganda. Goebbels can talk all he wants about straightening the front line, but death notices and trains with invalids speak otherwise. Blitzkrieg is dead. It froze 30 kilometers from the Kremlin. The news of the German defeat near Moscow flies along telegraph wires faster than a bullet. It crosses oceans and borders. In London and Washington, Allied headquarters are buzzing. A psychological barrier is broken. Until this moment, it was believed that the German army could not be defeated in a direct clash, that its tactics and organization were flawless. Now the world sees the German soldier runs. He abandons his weapon. He is mortal. He is vulnerable. This knowledge changes the course of the war more than arms shipments. The fear of Teutonic fury vanishes. The Allies realize the Reich can be beaten. It can be destroyed. The Colossus turned out not to be steel, but made of freezing flesh and cast iron brittle in the cold. In Hitler's headquarters, the Wolf's Lair, hysteria is replaced by grave silence. Generals look for scapegoats. Commanders of armies and tank groups are removed from their posts. Guderian, Höppner, Brauchitsch, the architects of victories, are sent into retirement. But changing surnames does not change physics. The strategic initiative is lost. The Wehrmacht shifts to strategic defense. Now the war will be different. It will no longer be a war of motors and rapid breakthroughs. It will be a war of attrition, a war of resources, a war of factories. And in this war, Germany is doomed because its resources remained lying in the snows of Russia. Thousands of locomotives that didn't deliver shells. Millions of liters of fuel burned in vain. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, the best, experienced veterans of 1940, who now lie as solid dolls in the frozen ground. There is no one to replace them. The recruits who will come to replace them do not know how to fight the way those who died near Yakroma and Tula did. The quality of German infantry falls irreversibly. Relative silence falls on the battlefields, broken only by the howling of the wind. Russian burial teams collect corpses. The work is hard. Bodies have to be chopped out of the ice with crowbars and pickaxes. Germans are stacked like firewood. They are not buried. The ground cannot be dug. They are simply covered with snow until spring. Amidst this chaos and death, amidst mountains of twisted metal, wanders the ghost of defeat. It looks into the eyes of every surviving German soldier. There is no longer the arrogance of victors in their gaze. Deep animal fear has settled in them. Fear of space that cannot be conquered. Fear of a people who do not surrender even when the logic of war says they have lost. And fear of the cold that is always nearby, waiting for the fire to go out or the engine to stall. Moscow stood. Operation Typhoon choked on its own blood and frozen oil. The spring, compressed for 6 months, uncoiled and struck back. This blow threw the Germans back hundreds of kilometers to the west, but most importantly, it broke their belief in themselves. In the icy hell of 41, not only equipment burned, the hope of the Third Reich for world domination burned there. History took a turn. The world does not yet know how much blood will be spilled, but the vector is already set. Westward, home, into oblivion. 1975, Federal Republic of Germany. A cozy, clean apartment in a suburb of Munich. Outside the window is a peaceful European winter. Mild, damp, toothless. Central heating is working in the room. The cast iron ribs of the radiators are hot. It is impossible to touch them. The thermometer on the wall shows plus 22 degrees Celsius, an ideal microclimate. But the old man, sitting in a deep leather armchair, is shivering. This is Otto Gross, the very same Lance Corporal who, 34 years ago, on November 30th, 41, looked through 6-power Zeiss binoculars at the gold needles of the Moscow domes. He survived. He became a statistical error, a mistake in the calculations of death, which should have taken him along with the crew of the frozen tank. He returned home, but he did not return whole. A camel hair plaid covers his knees. Below the knees, there is nothing. Emptiness. The pant legs are neatly folded under and pinned with safety pins. His legs remained back there, in a dirty operating tent near Vyazma, thrown into a basin with bloody slush. A surgeon with red eyes and trembling hands sawed them off with an ordinary hacksaw to stop the gangrene.
Gross reaches for a cup of hot coffee. Porcelain clinks against the saucer. His hands do not obey. This is not Parkinson's. This is muscle memory. The body remembers that cold. It recorded it on the subcortex, in the genetic code. Gross takes a sip, burning his lips, but the warmth does not go inside. Inside him is an eternal rod of ice. He is in pain. Pain pulses where there is no flesh. Phantom pains. A neurological phenomenon. Severed nerve endings send distress signals to the brain from the void. He feels his non-existent toes right now, this second, curling from frost at minus 40 degrees. He feels the bone that isn't there freezing through. He feels the skin, which turned to dust 3 decades ago, bursting. The brain refuses to accept the amputation. For the brain, Otto Gross is still standing on that highway, at the 30th kilometer. He is still trying to start the dead engine. He is still waiting for an order that will never be carried out. He closes his eyes. The dark room disappears. White light flares up, blinding light of the snowy desert cutting the retina. Those 30 kilometers, the distance of a single forced march. In 41, they seemed within arm's reach, visible horizon. Now he knows the truth. These 30 kilometers turned out to be longer than his whole life. It was not a distance in space. It was the distance between ambition and reality, between life and death. He remembers the faces of friends. Hans, who fell asleep in a snowdrift and didn't wake up. Weber, burned alive while trying to warm the tank with a blowtorch. Schmidt, who became an ice statue in the trench. They remained young. They remained whole. They lie in the Russian earth, having become part of its chemistry, fertilizer for the fields. And he, Gross, sits here in the warmth and slowly goes mad from the silence. Silence is the most terrible thing. Back there, near Moscow, silence was a harbinger of an attack or death from hypothermia. Here, silence is a vacuum in which the screams of the dying echo. He often thinks about what stopped them. Newspapers wrote about General Frost, about the mud season, about Hitler's mistakes. Gross chuckles, dry lips crack. No, not the frost. The frost was just a tool.
They were stopped by something harder than ice. He remembers the attack of the Siberians. He remembers how the Russians went into battle. There was no fear in their movements. There was a primal, tectonic force in them. They were part of this winter. They did not fight nature. They were in alliance with it. The German steel machine, perfect, precise, mathematically calibrated, crashed not into an army. It crashed into an element. The Russian soldier in a quilted jacket and valenki turned out to be tougher than Krupp steel. His will to resist had a higher melting point than the German soldier's will to conquer. It was a thermodynamic catastrophe for the Wehrmacht. Entropy of the spirit. When the oil in your rifle freezes, that's a problem. When your faith in victory freezes, that's the end. Gross looks at the map of Europe hanging on the wall, the thin red line of the border, and a huge white spot in the east. Russia. It swallowed them. It ground up a 1,000,000-strong army with its icy jaws and spat out the remains. He was lucky. He survived. But what kind of life is this? The life of a cripple who wakes up every night from his own scream because he dreams that snow is burying his face. Snow stuffs his mouth, nose, ears, cold, prickly, heavy. It does not melt. Grandchildren ask him about the war. They want to hear about heroic tank attacks, about artillery duels, about strategies. What can he tell them? That war is not a feat? That war is when you try to peel frozen pants off your own skin along with the meat? That war is the smell of gangrene and the sight of blackened fingers tapping on the bottom of a metal basin? They won't understand. No one who wasn't there, in the icy hell of 41, will understand. It is a closed club of the dead, and Gross is its only living member in this room. He looks out the window again. It seems to him that the snow on the street is changing color. It is no longer white. It is gray, with veins of soot. And the shadows of trees turn into silhouettes of T-34 tanks. They stand and wait. They always wait. History has passed its sentence. The world's best military machine, created for dominance, was broken. It was broken by two factors combining at the point of absolute zero: the merciless nature of Eurasia and the unbending, irrational, furious will of a people defending their home. The ice melted in the spring of 42. It went into the ground as water. Along with it went the invincible army. Only memory remained. Memory that hurts like the severed legs of Lance Corporal Otto Gross. This pain will never pass. It will leave only with him into the grave, which will become the last warm refuge from the eternal cold of the Russian winter.